Hello once again, everybody. Greetings from Cooperstown, New York, side of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. And we welcome you to our latest online experience here at the Baseball Hall of Fame. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bruce Markison. I work in the education department here at the Hall of Fame. And today we continue a series that has been quite successful, not because of me, but because of the person we're interviewing. And that is Sue McKay, our guru of collections, or director of collections, as we more appropriately say, using the proper terminology. But Sue's been helping us the last several months with all sorts of caring and preservation tips for different kinds of artifacts and memorabilia. And today we are going to talk about caring for baseball cards. If you have questions for Sue, you can post those to our Zoom group chat. And we'll do that a little bit later on in the program. We want to welcome once again to our Hall of Fame airwaves, our Director of Collections, Sue McKay. Sue, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Bruce. How are you?
Not bad. The sun has peeked out a couple of times today after a bit of snow in the morning. It's kind of one of those four seasons days here in Cooperstown. You know, we get a little spring, fall, winter. Not much summer today, but I digress. We're going to talk about something that I know a lot of our fans are interested in, Sue. Baseball cards, their collections. I've been an avid collector since 1972, almost 50 years ago. And I've got about 35,000 cards at home, which might sound like a lot, but it's going to pale in comparison to our Hall of Fame collection. And we're going to talk about what we have here and what specifically we can do, what fans can do, what collectors can do to try to keep these cards in as good a condition as possible, while also making them displayable so that they can be showcased so that other people can enjoy them. So here we have a photograph from our collection downstairs. And a couple of things we want to point out here, Sue. First of all, let's begin with these shelving units. They are custom shelving units. And when we say they're custom, what's special about them? They're made, I guess, specifically for our collection, but what's unique about them?
Right. Well, they're powder coated, so they're supposed to be inert. So nothing in the collections room would be affected by any shelving units that we have there. We have movable shelving units, and then we have these static units that we place the baseball cards, those notebooks onto. So those had to be a specific length and height to be able to take the weight of these cards. There's about, 900 cards per binder, and there's over 200 binders. So there's a lot of weight there. But they're special shelving to be able to house collections related material.
So the movable shelves, while they're great and they create extra space, they're not sturdy enough for these heavy
binders? Well, you wouldn't want these to be moving around. I mean, they are in their sleeves, but you really want a static, type of bookshelf for your cards, just to keep them upright and intact.
Now, this is interesting. When we were starting to put together our Shoebox Treasures exhibit, which is a really fun exhibit up on the third floor of the museum. It's currently available for people to see. We had an estimate, I think, of about 135,000 cards. But then as our curators and our staff were putting the exhibit together, they realized we actually have a lot more than that. So give us kind of the approximate total. Where are we at in terms of the number of cards that are here at the Hall of Fame?
Well, we have over 200,000. We do have duplicates of cards, so they are a part of the mix. Cards in various condition, which we'll get into talking about a little bit later. But, there could be as many as 14 cards of the same person.
Yeah.
So, we've collected since 1937 all the way on up to the present. So a lot of cards have come in over those years, and we've just kept building and building the collection because we never, uh, buy, sell, or trade. Everything that's donated stays here forever. And so it's our responsibility in the collections department to care for it.
I have to wonder if that 200,000, if that's, it's certainly one of the biggest collections in the world. It's probably hard to say if it is the biggest. I know Keith Olbermann, somebody that has actually helped us out with our Card Corner features at the website. He's an avid collector. He gets every Topps card from every set every year. And I know on a private level, he has one of the largest private collections out there. But 200,000 baseball cards, that's got to be top 10 in the world.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. There are other museums that have large collections. The Metropolitan Museum of Art has a nice collection, and there's collections sprinkled throughout not only the United States, but throughout the world, because the Japanese have put out baseball cards, and a number of other countries. So a lot of cards out there.
You mentioned the Metropolitan. That's the Jefferson Burdick collection, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you ever seen that in person?
I haven't in person, but I've seen images of it, and they're beautiful cards. They put them out on exhibit and really did a stunning job.
So 200,000 cards here. Some of these do go back to the 19th century, although the majority would be from the 20th and now the 21st centuries. Let's talk a little bit about some of the bullet points here on our slide, Sue. Number one, you talk about archival quality binders. What exactly is archival quality?
Well, that's going to be an inert. They're plastic, but they're inert. So the sleeves inside them are inert polypropylene, and these binders are inert as well, which means that there's no chemicals that are going to harm anything. We talked about boxes last week. It's the same idea, only these binders are acid-free, and the sleeves are as well. So you can be assured that when you're buying this material, that there's nothing harmful that's going to be touching the pieces that you're trying to store, whether it be cards or anything, bats, any type of baseball equipment. It's best to go acid-free. Baseballs, we talked about last week with the acid-free pens. That's really the way to go. And that's what we've been able to do with all of these cards.
Sue, ever since we announced that we were planning and preparing the Shoebox Treasures exhibit, we've been getting these incredible donations from people. They maybe they have too many cards in their house. They don't feel like they can give them the attention they need. So they've actually been donating a number of cards to the Hall of Fame, some of which we add to our collection, some of which we use for giveaway purposes, especially with young children who visit the museum. And so we get them sent to us in all sorts of forms. And I have a number of them here in the Selig Center, which is housed in the Education Department. Now, here I have what appears to be a rather old album. And as you can see, it's a few years old, maybe a few decades old. My guess is this is not archival quality. Would that be your guess as well?
That would be correct. A lot of folks just used regular binders, school binders that they went out and bought, and just, put those binders, just filled them up, and over time. But those binders tend to disintegrate over time. The bindings come apart. All the seams start bursting. They're vinyl, and so they're not going to last. And there's the inside and what they look like. And sleeves that are not archival can actually do a lot of damage to the cards because they can adhere to the fronts and the backs. I think we've all at some point at home, maybe in the old days, we had our photos or cards stored in something that wasn't quite appropriate, and they've actually stuck to the plastic.
Yeah.
And if you try to move it, it'll actually, do damage.
Right.
So that's why it's so important with the paper material, especially to get it right and to get the archival quality products, because you're not going to have those kinds of problems.
And I want to talk about sleeves more in depth in a few moments. I think, though, another problem with this kind of a binder, not that it's terrible. I mean, it has use, it has certain uses. But the problem with baseball cards, when you put this down, the binder is such that it's kind of small and the sleeves stick out through the bottom. So when you put them on a shelf, I guess the cards could bend, right?
Yeah, so that's another great thing about these archival binders is that they're the right size for what you're storing.
Yeah.
You never want to get any type of container that's too small, because then you're compromising whatever you're putting inside and you're putting it at risk.
Yeah. Now, this is not to say that we don't appreciate these donations. And what we're going to eventually do, we've had so many donations, we haven't caught up at this point. What we'll eventually do is we will take these cards out of this binder and out of these sleeves, and we will, in some cases, put them into packs for giveaway purposes. And then, some of the more interesting cards of Hall of Famers, in some cases, those might be added to our collection. But when they come here, they do come here in a variety of different forms. So this a binder that it really is meant more for loose leaf, not for baseball cards. And eventually we will have to discard this binder. But that brings us, Sue, to our second bullet point, and that's very important. Must keep these cards away from the light. So if you're storing them in binders, you don't want to open up the binder and then leave it flat and open to the light, because the cards that are on that exposed page, they're going to get damaged.
That's correct. Like anything, light is damaging to all things. So it's important to have them in some sort of good notebook or container. Now they also have boxes, acid-free baseball boxes that you can purchase as well. And those work fine too. It's just that we have so many cards that this type of arrangement that you see on the screen worked well for us, because you can fit, almost 1,000 cards per binder, whereas the boxes are small, rectangular. So you'd have so many boxes that it would be unwieldy for us to have them on shelving units. But with the smaller personal collections, the baseball card boxes could work just fine, as long as you interleave the cards with acid-free tissue so that they're not touching one another. It would be a perfect solution as well.
Now, in the photograph, the way that we have the albums, they are stacked vertically like this, or like this more properly, so that this part, is it the spine? Is that what we call this?
Yes, that's the spine.
So the spine is outwardly facing. It's a good place to put a label so you know what company, whether it's Topps, Donruss, Fleer, Score, Upper Deck, what have you, the year, if it's a complete set or maybe a partial set, you can indicate that here. So we do it vertically. And I know one of the reasons we have to do that, we have so many cards that they have to be stored vertically for space considerations. But if somebody has a smaller collection and they have the correct binder to use, could they lay it flat on the shelf? Is that also an option?
Yes, they could. A smaller collection, that would work just fine, as long as you didn't put a lot of weight. You wouldn't want to have 10 binders stacked up on top of one another. But as long as you kept it to 5 or under, per place, that would work fine too.
Right. Now, we do have another album, and this actually came in from a generous donor. It's the 1990 Bowman set, or Bauman set complete. And this is an album that, to me, looks a little bit better, and it actually does say baseball card album. Is this legit? Is this good?
Well, those were popular, in the 70s and 80s, when it was baseball cards had a resurgence in popularity. So companies would make these notebooks specifically for baseball card collecting, but those are not acid free either.
They're not.
They look nice and store your cards, but again, those are not acid free material.
So when you're looking to get an album, you want acid free. Any particular brands for fans to look for?
Certainly there's Gaylord.com, universityproducts.com. There are a number of archival companies that carry these products. And so just Google, archival products, and a whole bunch of companies will come up, and, do the research and look through the websites, and you'll see a lot of different types of items being offered, not only for cards, but for all other things you want to store as well.
So we need to have proper archival quality binders. We need to keep the binders closed, away from the light, and either stack them vertically or flat, but no more than 5 in any one stack. If we do all those things, Sue, we're going to greatly reduce the likelihood of fading, correct?
Absolutely, yes, because light is an enemy of paper, whether it be photographs or cards or newspaper articles, anything. Your light and your environment is the main cause. If it's not up to standards, that's what's going to do the damage.
All right. Let's talk about sleeves here. And boy, you guys are really testing my pronunciation skills with this first bullet point. And that is the proper word. That's not supposed to say insert. That's supposed to say inert. So
that's correct. Proper. Yeah, inert polypropylene sleeves.
Polypropylene. Okay.
Right. And inert just simply means chemically inactive. So that means that there's nothing that's going to be touching the card that's going to damage it. That's key. Plastics are very bad because they have petroleum in them. They have oil as part of their makeup. So it's really key to have these inert products. That's why we're so emphatic about acid-free and other inert products. That means everything.
All right, so I have an example here. It is from a company called Print File, and they say this is archival preservers. Is this a good sheet to use? From what you can tell?
I mean, certainly you want to do a little research. If you can on the websites, go and read the listings for each product. And if you have questions, these companies have great customer service folks. So feel free to call those 800 numbers and ask them any questions that you may have about their products, because they know more than anyone in terms of what they're selling and what they have. So don't be bashful about that. Do the research and ask the hard questions.
Now with these sleeves, they are top loading. In other words, you can kind of peel back a little bit the top of each card slot, and you put the card in through the top. Years ago, I had some side loading sleeves, and I noticed with them they would sometimes not fall completely out, but they would start inching toward the side, and I had to sort of tuck them back in. So am I assuming correctly that the top loading is the way you want it?
It is the way to go. The side loading is very cumbersome to get the cards in and out. And when you're handling these cards, you're putting stress on them. And so you don't want to have to be forcing a card into a pocket. So the top loaders are really the easiest to load. And they protect, from the fingerprints, from abrasion, and from dust. So the top loading is the way to go.
Now, let's say I fill this with cards and I have 9 slots. I don't want to do this, do I?
You don't want to fold it.
Do I?
No, and you also don't want to double load it. So don't put 2 cards in one slot. I mean, that there's a tendency to want to do that because there's a front and a back to a sleeve.
Yeah.
But not only are you hiding the contents of the back of the one card, well, of both cards, but you're forcing 2 cards into a slot that was only meant for one, and you're setting yourself up for damage of your cards doing it that way. So 1 per slot is the way to go.
Yeah, it's going to be a little more costly because you're going to need more plastic sleeves, but it's going to be worth it, as you say, from preservation, but also a lot of people like to look at the back of the card.
Well, yeah.
Sometimes, you have cards where they don't clearly identify the players, like those SSPC cards that came out in the mid-1970s. They don't have the player names on the front. So if you have just the one card in the sleeve, you can just flip the sheet over. You can see who the player is. And even if they do identify the player, there's all sorts of biographical information. There's trivia questions. Those funny old cartoons they used to have, John enjoys hunting in the winter. I mean, some of it sounds a little hokey, but it's all part of the fun of cards.
It's part of the history.
All right, very good. So we protect from fingerprints, abrasions that we might do, especially with our fingernails, dust that can accumulate as well. But even though you have the cards in these sheets, these polypropylene sheets, you want to minimize the handling as much as possible. The more you handle, the more likely tears, creases will result.
And that's true of anything that we handle. If you put it in some type of nice container, you're reducing your risk. And that's what it's all about.
When companies that sell sheets advertise them, do they usually make clear that they're polypropylene?
I think certainly.
Or is that something you have to ask?
Well, the archival companies do, certainly. They're going to give you all the specs about the product because that's what's important, and they know that's important. That's why they're in business. So, they usually give a lot of detail about each product that they're offering. If you don't see information on a product, then that's when you need to ask the hard questions.
Right. Absolutely. Now, I don't know exactly where these sheets came from, how old they are, but I can tell just looking at them, we got some problems here. We've got warping, bubbling. You can, I think, visibly see that even on our relatively small computer screen. You've actually got a tear here. This part of the sheet is coming apart, the top row. So maybe at one point this would have been a fine sheet, but it has seen better days. So I guess it teaches us that at some point we either have to consider, are these the right sleeves? And B, even if they're the right sleeves, maybe they've just gone through too much. Maybe they're too old and need to be replaced.
Right. And that's what happened to the old plastic over time, is you would see the warping and the bubbling and the tearing because they just deteriorate over time. That's what happens to plastic. It doesn't last. So that's why it is so important to house your cards into something that's going to last, first of all, and not damage what you're trying to store and take care of.
So this strange bubbling that we see, is that caused by light or another factor?
It would probably be heat or cold. The person that passed these cards along to us may have had these in an attic or basement. And those fluctuations of temperature over time is going to cause this exact type of damage.
So these are some upper deck cards from, I believe, 1989. And in the next few days, probably after Thanksgiving, I'm going to be getting these cards out of these sheets. and getting them into a more protective environment. But
Right.
again, we've been getting cards from so many generous people all over the country. It's we've almost become overrun here in the Selig Center. It's fun to see all these cards, but there is some work that needs to be done with them as well. Let's talk a little bit about variations in cards. We tend to think of baseball cards today, and really, ever since Cy Berger and Woody Gelman got together back in 1952, and they kind of developed the prototype for the modern day card, 2.5 by 3.5 inches. Most cards, with a few exceptions, have been that size since then. But there are some variations, especially as we go back in time. Let's talk, Sue, about tobacco cards. First of all, for those fans who don't know what tobacco cards, explain what they are and what kinds of sizes did they come in?
Well, cards were printed not only on cardboard, but they were also printed on silk or later on plastic. So that really kind of gives you an idea of the types of material you're working with, and also would tip you off about having to store these in different ways. So the cardboard cards, pre-1900 cards, around 1886, they were cigarette pack sized, and they were put into cigarettes actually to protect the cigarettes from damage, ironically. So those were about the size of a cigarette pack, and those were not only baseball cards, but a lot of other types of genres as well. Other sports, there were a theater production. There were animals, other sports, all sorts of different things that you found on a card. It wasn't just baseball. But in the mid-19th century, baseball and photography were gaining popularity. So that's when the baseball was really predominantly being made into cards.
Right.
And in the 1860s, there were trade cards, which meant a lot of companies, they would put a baseball player on the front, and then they would put their advertisement on the back. So it was really an advertising card for the company that happened to have baseball on it, because that was popular at the time as well. So there was a dual purpose there with these cards.
And if you look at the image, the card in the lower left-hand corner, that is one of the tobacco cards. I don't know who the player is. Looks like he played for the New York Giants. Mm-hmm. And you see the front side of the card is the colorized image of the player. But then the reverse side says Old Mill Cigarettes. That's the advertisement you're talking about.
That's the advertisement that I'm talking about. And, it made sense for those companies to have something that would protect the cigarettes, that would advertise their company, and that would put a baseball player in there as well. So you're really getting a lot in the pack to collect. That was another component of it, was that you could collect these, and many, many people did. And if those folks stored them well, the colors would remain very vivid. And you see that turkey red cabinet card there of Walter Johnson. The colors on that are just wonderful. The yellows and the greens, the blues. That easily could have faded out if it was not stored correctly, but somebody just collected it and put it away in a safe place. And thank goodness, because that's what you get when something is stored well.
Now, you mentioned a lot of these tobacco cards were the size of the cigarette packaging. So is that smaller than 2.5 by 3.5, or a little bit larger?
That's the size. That's the small 2.5 by 3.5. That's
it is.
It's the size of a cigarette pack.
Okay. Were there any variations? Were there some cards a little smaller, a little bit bigger?
Well, they had, as you can see, those old judge cards. Those are small. That picture there is small. But then you see the turkey red card, which is actually called a cabinet card. That's considered a baseball card, but it's, as you can see, quite a bit larger. So they really varied in size depending on the company that produced them. Just in this great collage, you see the different sizes. Some were postcard size, some were larger than postcard size, like the turkey red. So it really depended on what the company wanted to put out. It was at their discretion. And that's what makes card collecting fun, because I think if they were all the same size, it wouldn't be quite as much fun to look at them and collect them. But that does pose sleeve considerations. Obviously, you're going to need different size sleeves if you have a non-standard size card. But the companies make those because they know that the collectors have all sorts of different sizes. So you are able to purchase a sleeve that will fit anything from a cigarette card all the way on up to, you know, a turkey red or even larger, you know, like an 8.5 by 11 cards. You know, they certainly have produced those recently. So there's really a product that will fit any type of card size that you have.
So I'm really curious about these cabinet cards. I've heard of them. I don't have any of them in my collection. Why are they called cabinet cards? I mean, is that how they were stored or displayed?
Yeah. In Victorian times, they were stored in cabinets in people's homes. So that's what size they had. Now, the smaller cards that were about the size of a business card were actually called carte de visite cards. And because they were the size of a business card, back in the Victorian days, the gentlemen had cards with their name, just their names on them, so that they could pass them out, you know, when they met someone. And so the card companies thought that that would be a nice size to have for the early cards as well, kind of playing off that idea. So the small cards started out the history and in the 1900s got bigger, but then they also changed shape. There are actually disc shaped cards, round cards that are very collectible as well. They fit beautifully in the regular 9-slot card sleeves, but are fun too because they're round. So I think there were even triangles made, you know, 10, 20 years ago. So now many different shapes, which I think makes it fun.
How big were these disc cards? I mean, were they like the size of a quarter or larger?
Well, they did, if you remember the Dixie cups, the ice cream, the lids were actually baseball related. So there are lids that you can collect. But yeah, they ran the gamut. They could be quarter size, they could be $half size, they could be the Dixie cup size. Gosh, the companies have really, over time, really put out a lot of variety in sizing and design.
So you can find whatever you need. You can get something that really is tailor-made. If it's a card that has been, you know, produced fairly significantly, odds are that somebody's got a sleeve that's going to fit it.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's talk about some conservation concerns, especially with some of the older cards that we see here. And we see some examples of, you know, very significant loss, especially to the front of the cards. And let's talk about what's going on with some of these. One of the problems on display here is adhesive residue. I'm guessing that's Scotch tape, but maybe it
It
involves
is.
other things too.
It is. It's tape, and you can see very clearly what happens to tape over time. Of course, when you first put it on, it looks all clear, and you think, oh, this is perfect. This is going to work. But over time, it darkens, it gets brittle. It can either flake off. Well, it would usually flake off, but sometimes it gets nasty and it'll just stick on and won't flake off. So if you try to take it off at home, you'll just rip the guy's face off along with the tape, which is why you never want to try anything at home. Leave it to the conservators, because they've got the skills to be able to remove this tape and make the repairs that they can to try to make the card look better. But these are great examples of what tape does. It'll either rip off the corners, it'll turn dark, and it's just, it's nasty. But back in the day, we didn't know these types of things about the, tape and staples and paper clips and all of that. So that's what a lot of folks did. And that's a great example of what happens when you do that.
Boy, the poor guy in the middle, his face is completely obliterated. I don't even know who that player is.
No. And it certainly would take some work to try to get that tape off of there.
Yeah.
It's a job of patience.
Yeah. I've got a horror story to tell you, and don't faint on me when you hear this. But my first year of collecting cards was 1972, and I was all of 7. So, I was a real expert on conserving cards at that point. And I knew nothing about albums or plastic sheets or anything like that. So I got the bright idea. I took all my 1972 cards and I literally Scotch taped them into an old composition notebook, every one of those cards. Now, I tried not to tape over the guy's face. I tried to do top and bottom, which helped a little bit. And then when I was done with the notebook was so jam-packed with cards that the notebook normally would be about this thick. And then by the end, it was like this. It was pretty weird. And I salvaged a few of the cards, and I still have a lot of those cards with the tape marks, but they're not all that sightly. So that's my personal horror story.
Yeah, and a lot of people did that. Or they would put a thumbtack in the card and put them on bulletin boards. That was another, or to the wall. They would thumbtack them to the wall. Yeah. And of course, once you put a hole in it, that hole is going to stay there. The conservators can really work some good miracles in cleaning and restoring cards, but better to just not do those kinds of things in the beginning. Then you don't have to worry about it.
Right. Now, the card lower center doesn't look like it has any tape marks on it. It just looks like it's faded. So that's a sunlight problem?
It's faded and it's got a lot of creases in it. So, some folks used to carry cards in their wallet.
Yep.
So the constant sitting down on the wallet could do that. Some folks put those cards in their bicycle spokes. That would do it as well. Or just over time, handling. That's why handling is so important, because the more you handle something, the more risk there is of creasing to occur. And that's what you're seeing on this card. You've got some bent corners, some loss in the top right corner, but you see lots of creasing and what they call occlusions, loss of the paper surface. So a lot of things can happen to paper over time, and all of these are great examples.
I want to talk about one other thing that can happen, and this, I guess, is kind of an extreme, but I'm sure you've seen examples of it, where a card starts to peel in half. In other words, the front of the card with a picture, that layer actually peels off the back of the card. So now you have a two-layered card.
Yeah, that can happen. Again, that's environmental, with temperatures and humidity fluctuating. Uh, there's going to be a give and take with the paper. So it's, putting them in sleeves is good, but you've got to have the right temperature and humidity as well, because if you're putting your cards in an attic, basement, or garage, bad things are going to happen. Even if you've got them in your acid-free binders, you do not want to have them in those types of areas. You need to be very mindful of your environmental conditions.
Don't leave your cards in the backseat of a car on a hot day.
Yes,
Don't
right.
put them in front of an air conditioner or a fan.
Yes.
Or a heater.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, all of those. Yes.
All right, let's look at some other conservation projects. And I guess these are some cards that we've sent out to conservators, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
We have a card of an old-time player named George Stone. And this card was actually conserved by an organization called the NEDCC in 2016. What is the NEDCC?
That stands for the Northeast Document Conservation Center, and they are located in Andover, Massachusetts. And they have done many hundreds of documents and cards. All of our paper material is worked on by this organization. They do great work. And you can see in that slide, you can see the loss on the George Stone card up in the top right corner. They are able to, they're not going to be able to bring it back to the day it was produced. It's almost like a faded autograph. You can't bring it back to what it was when it was brand new. But there's reduction of, pencil marks. Sometimes these cards were drawn on. And they use Japanese paper and wheat starch paste and work very slowly and methodically. They also clean the paper as well first, actually, so that they know exactly what they've got to deal with. And then there's a lot of patience and expertise that goes into making repairs on paper. It's very labor intensive. But they do a lot of great work at the lab. There are paper labs across the United States, and those folks are just doing a tremendous job and just restoring documents and preserving history.
Yeah. You mentioned something called wheat starch paste. I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah, it looks exactly like what it sounds. It's a starchy wheat colored paste that they use. It's inert, another inert product. It's not going to harm the paper, but it acts as a sealant. So you put the Japanese paper, which is incredibly thin, and then you spread the wheat starch paste on that Japanese paper, and that makes the repair. And you can't see it. It's virtually invisible, but it makes the repair in a very non-harmful way. So you wouldn't get out your Elmer's glue and start, gluing down these parts that are creased or broken. You've got to use something that is not going to harm the paper. And so that's what the conservators use.
Yeah, it's amazing what they can do. Really is. Let's talk about some other projects that have been worked on in the past. We have cards with major vertical creases, clear signs of masking tape at the top and bottom of the card, and also adhesive staining on the reverse. And I guess conservators can do some work here as well.
They can. So what they'll do is relax the paper. So as part of the cleaning process, they can actually relax the paper, and some of those creases can either disappear or be not as evident. So they would do that. They would also work on any losses. They would get that tape off of the card as well. that masking tape or Scotch tape can come off, but it's a labor intensive process. But they do it well and they do it right. But it's not worth trying at home, because once you make a mistake, you're stuck with it. It's a mistake that you live with. So it's best to leave any type of card restoration to the professionals.
I find that Eddie Collins card really interesting because, we think about action photography. Color action photography did not start on baseball cards until 1971 tops. But here we have some black and white action photography, which I haven't seen on a lot of old cards.
Yeah.
A lot of the old action shots were actually done in studio with props.
That's right.
It's from a real game.
That's right. So baseball and photography popular at the same time. So it only made sense that they would coexist and produce some really fantastic cards. They even have double folders and triple folders that you can open that have multiple players as a part of one card. And Hassan was known for doing that, and in color and black and white, and those are fabulous. There's just some great companies that did some wonderful work.
Now, the work that these conservators do is not inexpensive. From what I understand from my notes here, it could be $330 to $400 to work on a single card.
Right. And that, it purely depends on how much work has to be done. Some of those cards we saw on the last slide could easily be more than that, because they require more time and more product, more expertise. So they can run certainly over $500, $600, $700. It just depends how much work that the card needs. But these conservators are very good. They give you a treatment proposal. If you send your card in and they take a look at it, they will do a proposal to you with exactly what they're going to do to the card. They will also give you a cost estimate as well, so that you know about what it's going to be in terms of materials and labor. So they're very upfront, they're very transparent in their work, and it's nice because upfront kind of what's going to happen, what they're going to do. There shouldn't be any surprises.
Here we have a sample of a treatment proposal for a card, and we see 7 different categories where they're going to do work. If you would, Sue, run us through this fairly quickly, if you could.
Yeah. So what they do first, they always take pictures, before and after pictures of anything that you take to a conservator. So they do color digital images of the card before and after treatment. Now they use a heat and a scalpel, and that releases any of the tape that's still attached to the cards. They surface clean the cards, using special erasers to remove the surface soil or any gummy adhesive. They follow with spot testing, because they need to know, especially on these color cards, they don't want to use a solvent and take away any color. So they need to spot test first before they apply a solvent, and then use a suction table to remove the staining and residue. Sometimes there's water damage to cards, which you will see what's called tide lines, and that means that a card has sustained water damage. So they deacidify the card to remove any of those tide line water stains, and then they would air dry them. They would repair any of those lifted areas with wheat starch paste that I mentioned, and then also humidify the cards to reduce the creases. And all of this takes time to do. It's not a one-day thing.
Yeah.
It takes time to work on these cards and have those repairs made correctly. So, if there's a lot of paper fiber damage, it'll take more time to relax these creases, and then they would blot them to return them to plane, which means so that they're not warped, so that they're straight and flat. So that's a little bit of what goes into the treatment proposal of a card.
That's amazing. It's like a precise surgical operation.
Well, it is, absolutely. They use tools as surgeons do because it's very fine, detailed work.
Really amazing what they're able to do. We're going to start taking questions for Sue, and I already see that some have posted in our Zoom group chat. We'll get to those in a moment. Before we do that, we do want to remind you about supporting our programs and becoming a member of the Hall of Fame. Through the Hall of Fame's membership program, fans from around the country and the world can be part of the team that is preserving the game's history and celebrating the all-time greats. If you become a member, you receive a full roster of benefits, and that includes unlimited admission to the museum for a full year. You also get 6 copies of our magazine, which is excellent, Memories and Dreams. We ask you to consider becoming a member. Whatever membership you can afford would be great. Think about becoming part of something greater. Visit baseballhall.org/join and become a member of the Hall of Fame. Again, that's baseballhall.org/join. All right, let's go to some of the questions that have come in already. And our first question comes in from Chris Pinino. I hope I've pronounced your name right, Chris. Can you give a couple of specific examples of archival quality binder/page manufacturers? I think you had mentioned Gaylord earlier, and any other companies.
Yes, universityproducts.com is another source. And both of those, Gaylord University Products, are good. There are also other sources out there. So all you need to do really is Google archival products. And you will get a list of manufacturers of companies that will supply archival products.
Glinda Perrott has somewhat of a follow-up question to that. Where would Sue recommend that someone buy these binders or boxes? Is it strictly over the internet, or in some cases, maybe in larger cities? Do they actually have stores that you can go to?
I think the Container Store also has archival products as well. That's certainly worth checking into. But these are very specialized products, and it's good to get them from the manufacturers because they can also, any questions that you have, they can explain exactly what the product is. So in terms of big box stores, as I say, I think the Container Store does carry archival products, but it's easy to do the research online to see what other stores might have these types of products.
Would you advise people to maybe steer away from the hobby stores? I mean, the hobby stores are great in terms of cards and sets of cards and things like that. But do they generally have the proper archival binders and sheets that you want?
Well, I haven't been in a hobby store in a very long time. Again, best to just check to see what they carry. Hopefully these hobby stores are understanding the nature of collecting and how important it is to preserve what hobbyists are collecting. So they may, but certainly worth checking into.
All right, I got to ask you a personal question here. The vast majority of my cards are in Ultra Pro sheets. Is that okay?
If it says archival on them, or on the the packaging, then you're good to go. But it needs to say that somewhere.
Okay, very good. Another question comes in from Andrew Wilson. Sue, can you fit the thicker cards into the binders? Not sure what thicker cards he's referring to. There are some cards that, I guess cards in the past were a little bit thicker, like cards from the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
They
Sometimes
get thinner in the 70s. So is that a concern?
you would just need to not have as many cards in the binder. You know, if these are thicker cards, they're going to stack one on top of the other. That will make a thicker notebook. You can see Bruce has there.
You want it to flare up like this.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So you would be putting less in a binder, but it can be done.
But the sheets themselves, they'll accommodate those.
Yes, the sheet protectors, yes, they will.
All right, very good. We have just a couple of minutes left with Sue. If anybody wants to get in a final question. Sue, we talked about the collection here at the Hall of Fame. It's over 200,000 cards. Do you have a collection of your own at home as well?
I have a 1961 Topps set, incomplete. I need to finish it off.
Okay.
It was a gift from my mom.
Nice.
So I'm working on that. I'm missing the larger stars of the set. So that's a goal of mine. I do love the 19th century cards. I do not own any, but I really enjoy that time period because it was just anything in that time period was just well done, quality manufacture, and really tells the history of the game. So those are my favorites, especially the Turkey Reds. Those are, I think, my favorite cards, along with the double and triple Hassan folders.
Yeah.
Are, I think, among the most beautiful cards.
Now, this is going to be a stupid question. Why are they called Turkey Red?
Ooh, I think that was the name of the company, I believe.
They didn't come with packages of sliced turkey, did they?
No,
Well, okay.
no turkey, no Thanksgiving cards produced.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually the producer would, have that advertising on the back of what they were selling. So I believe that was a cigarette manufacturer.
You know, the cards that were really hard for me to even get them in good condition out of the packaging, back in the 70s when a Hostess, like Cupcakes, they had cards that you would actually, they would be at the bottom of the package, but invariably they would have some of that delicious filling on them. Very hard to get off the cards.
It is. And, the gum cards, there were a lot of confectionery cards, cookies, potato chips. I mean, a lot of cards and a lot of different kinds of food products, which sometimes would wreak havoc with the card that was in the packaging, like the Hostess Cupcake cards. So some of them came out greasy or with staining right off the bat before you even dealt with them. So packaging is important.
Okay, Sue, one last question that's come in from one of our fans, Glinda, who wants to know, what is the oldest card in the Hall of Fame collection?
Ooh, well, we've got cards from the 1860s. So I would say those would be the oldest cards that we have. And they look much like photographs, actually, more than cards. It was actually a photograph of a player, Bruce, as you mentioned, being taken in a studio, right, instead of being out on the field. So those were some early cards that we have that are very small, but really more photographic than the cards that we think of today.
That's amazing. A paper product from 160 years ago, and we've still got them here at the Hall of Fame. That's terrific. Sue, we really appreciate, once again, great information. This is the last in our series of Ask the Expert programs for 2020, but we may be doing some different type programs in 2021. We do want to thank you, Sue. You've been wonderful, not only today, but with all the other preservation tips. I know it's helped a lot of our viewers and our listeners. Some of them a little depressed because they've been doing things the wrong way, but now they can start to make corrective measures, and that's the important thing. So we do really appreciate your efforts, Sue.
Well, it's never too late to to look at your collection and decide what you want to do with it and how best to store it. So folks, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me here at the hall.
Once again, we thank our Director of Collections, our guru, Sue McKay, for helping us with Ask the Expert, caring for baseball cards. We hope you've enjoyed the program. I know that I have. A reminder that coming up next week, Tuesday, the 1st of December at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, our virtual author series will return. We will talk to former Los Angeles Dodgers GM Fred Clare about his 30-year tenure with the organization. And we're going to talk to the man who has authored a biography of Fred Clare, a longtime writer, journalist named Tim Madigan. So both Tim and Fred will join us 1 week from today. That's Tuesday, December the 1st at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. Thanks, everybody, for being with us for Ask the Expert. Have a great day, everyone.